Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
For Better or For Worse by Syluk. The Pirate King Monkey D. Luffy didn't come back to save the world. His only wish is to save his friends and assure their absolute happiness this time around, even if he has to turn said world upside down while trying to achieve that. For better or for worse. Adios.
Ah, Ace is on fire. Luffy, Usopp. 8, Nami. 9, Zoro, Sanji. 10, Beppo, Ace, Sabo. 11, Law, 15 Y.O. Sanji was absolutely sure that he was going to die. He didn't want to, of course, but his wish couldn't change the fact that he was now barely holding onto his consciousness. There was no strength left to even be afraid. He was lying on his back, his hollow gaze fixed on the endless blue, stretching above, like the legendary sea, the all-blue. He wanted to find it. He wanted to prove that it existed to unbelievers. He wanted to cook the best meal from ingredients found in that sea and then share it with the nakama that he would have inevitably met on the journey. Now, it truly seemed like an unreachable dream. If Sanji had any energy or fluids left in his body, he would have cried right now. Suddenly, a black-haired boy's head covered by a straw hat popped into his line of sight, his face etched with open concern. "Sanji?" He spoke slowly. The blonde blinked. He didn't know that starving to death actually made the person see hallucinations. Even if it did, he mused, it would definitely be some kind of food. Maybe a juicy roast, freshly baked bread, or even an appetizing. "Law!" the boy yelled, looking up and to the side. "Law, hurry up!" Sanji got curious. Mustering all his leftover strength, he turned his head toward the direction his illusion was looking. Another boy appeared out of thin air at the edge of the rock, this time older, probably in his mid-teen years. His keen gaze quickly scanned the area, taking in every detail, gauging the situation before meeting Sanji's blank stare. With his brow furrowed, the teen turned around. "Kora-san, catch," he said, dropping down the sword he carried. There was a surprised yelp, and then something heavy falling. "Law, you brat." Law smirked, but then he looked back at Sanji. All the mirth was replaced with a serious and worried expression. A moment later, he was already leaning above him. The straw-hatted kid was still here too, hovering anxiously nearby, but giving space for the guy. Sanji drew a sharp breath when two fingers pressed at the side of his neck, checking his pulse. This felt so real. He tried to open his mouth, a question if they were real or simply a product of his deteriorating brain on the tip of his tongue, but nothing happened. Parched lips refused to move, and no sound left his caked throat. "Will Sanji be fine?" the younger boy asked. The teen hummed softly under his breath, counting the heartbeat. "He's severely dehydrated and has been starving for several months if I had to guess." He pursed his lips and his scowl became more profound as he pulled his hand away from Sanji's neck. Golden eyes quickly scanned the emaciated body, mere bones, and skin at this point. "How do you know his name, Luffy?" That was a good question. Sanji was positive that he had never seen that kid. "He's nakama," was an instant reply with a subtle, invisible, obviously, hanging somewhere in the air. Oh, so the moment he thought about reaching all blue with his nakama, his mind decided to conjure the image of them. How cruel. Right, Law sighed as he stood up. Sanji watched him walk towards the old geezer and squatting down to check on him. His attention was drawn by two more kids with different hats on their heads and… "A bear? Why a bear?" "This is a lot of treasure," the boy with the cowboy hat noted, examining the old pirate's bag. Sanji's blood ran cold. All that gold and jewelry were supposed to fund the construction of the sea restaurant Zeph dreamed about. He destroyed his life as a pirate. There was no way he would allow someone to even touch that money. Illusion or not, he needed to stop them at any cost. "No," he croaked out. With the help of a sudden surge of adrenaline, he actually managed to flip his body on his stomach. "Don't too." A dry heave interrupted his sentence, sending his fragile frame into a painful convulsion. "Sanji!" The straw-hatted boy gasped in alarm. Rubbery arms embraced Sanji from behind into a gentle hug, holding him in place. "Don't worry, we'll take care of you." You're safe now. I'll protect you. Everything will be fine. You'll be fine. Law's gonna fix you. You and Cook Osan are gonna be okay. Luffy babbled into the blonde boy's ear. His quiet voice was comforting and soothing. It wrapped around Sanji and carried him off to a world where nothing was wrong. Slowly, he relaxed. This was supposed to be his imaginary nakama, so he could trust them, right? We'll get stronger. All of us. Together, the kid continued. And while the volume of his voice stayed the same, a sheer conviction in that statement spurred Sanji's heart into an excited flutter. And then we'll leave for our journey, have tons of fun adventures, meet a lot of people, defeat all our enemies, and this time you'll reach all blue. I'll make sure of that, I promise. Sanji shifted, trying to look behind. The embrace loosened up, and Luffy moved so that he could see his face and the wide, bright grin that adorned it. The blonde stared, a spark of emotions, joy, awe, hope, gratitude, flickering through his dull blue eyes. A sea king arose from the ocean, fixing his curious gaze on the kids scattered around the rock. No one even twitched at the sudden appearance of the powerful sea creature, and Sanji had to admit that he was completely losing his mind. Sadness swept over him, and he wanted to cry again. None of this was real. All of them were just a creation of his dying brain that were bound to disappear any moment. Sanji glanced back at the straw-hatted boy. The latter's smile was gone, replaced by the concerned frown. He wanted to tell him that it was fine, that he didn't want to die, but he accepted that, and he was glad that despite his hallucination being so bizarre, it turned out absolutely amazing. But there was no energy left, so all Sanji could muster was a faint quirk up of his lips before he closed his eyes and slipped into a blissful darkness. When Sanji slumped in his arms, Luffy panicked. He knew Sanji's story, of course, but hearing about it and experiencing it by holding such a frail body of his nakama was two entirely different things. What if changing events of the past caused the absence of the ship that was supposed to save them? What if it was too late now? What if he can't help Sanji? What if Sanji died? Luffy cried out desperately, extreme terror coursing through his veins. Please, help Sanji. Alarmed by his tone, Law's attention snapped from giving instructions to Corazon and Zoro down on their ship to his youngest brother, then immediately moved on the unconscious boy in his arms. He quickly walked closer and gripped the blonde's wrist, checking his pulse. Calm down, he said to Luffy, flicking his forehead in order to ground the boy. He's alive. Nobody is dying on my watch. Once Corazon and Zoro are done, we'll bring them to the ship and I'll take care of them. But, with a sigh, the team took Luffy's hand and guided it to Sanji's wrist, setting his fingers above the vein. Can you feel the heartbeat? The younger Raven's expression hardened as he focused on the pulsing sensation under his fingers before giving a small nod. Now count it. Law observed his brother, how his lips moved with a soundless counting, and how with every higher number his posture lost its stiffness and wild panic in his eyes receded. He looked at the blonde boy again, his eyebrows drawing together. Despite what he told Luffy, this was a tough situation. He had already taken account of medical supply that came with a ship. The first thing he did when Luffy showed up with it, and it wasn't enough to save these people. Stabilize for a day, maybe two, yeah, but they needed hospital as soon as possible. La Tsked. He hated hospitals. Turning around, he noticed Sabo standing at the edge of the rock. Ace and Beppo were nowhere to be seen, probably already down on the ship with the treasure they collected to safeguard. Sabo, he called as he walked closer, they need a hose nearest inhabited island? The blonde scrunched up his face in thought. At this point, our best bet would be Logatown, he said. All other villages in this area are too small to have anything other than a tiny doctor office. How long till Logatown? 2 days if the wind is favorable. Law hummed, glancing briefly over his shoulder to Luffy. Hey, Quinto-un. The Sea King's red eyes narrowed as he aimed his attention at the teen. Can you pull the ship of this size? Quinto-un cocked his head to the side, considering. After a moment, he looked at the ship, then at Luffy, back at Law, and gave a firm nod. Everything's prepared. Zoro yelled from below. All right, Law breathed out. Luffy, bring your friend to the ship. The younger boy wordlessly went into motion, carefully picking Sanji up to carry him. Zoro, gather Ace with Beppo and put harnesses on Quinto-un. The future swordsman grunted an affirmative, already strolling inside the galley to look for two brothers. The Sea King submerged in water and appeared again in front of the vessel, in position to be tackled for the job. "Sabo, you help me with the old man." Sanji woke up. An impossible feat on its own really, because he should have been a dry corpse on that godforsaken rock by now. An annoying beeping on both of his sides, an equally annoying, weirdly shaped smudge on the white ceiling, and the smell of antiseptic stated otherwise. There was no sky above or stone under, no salty breeze, no scorching sun. Sanji was not in pain and actually felt quite good, despite the inability to muster enough strength to move his limbs. He was also lying in a comfy bed. Just how long was it since the last time he slept in a bed? Sanji could hear murmuring and half-whispering somewhere in the room, but the words eluded him. He was about to drift back into peaceful sleep when a sharp, "But he's a pirate," jolted him into full awareness again. Wide-eyed in surprise and confusion, he turned his head slightly to the side. The old geezer was in the hospital bed next to his, an IV and a heart monitor attached to his withered body, and the boy realized that he would see the same equipment on his left. 4 people were gathered near the closed door, the sight that made Sanji pause. 2 boys, the straw-hatted kid and the teen with a sword, that he had seen already and considered to be an illusion, were glowering at the middle-aged man in a white coat, definitely a doctor. A giant blonde man, wearing a black feathered coat, was leaning over the poor doctor with a stormy expression on his tattooed face. "He's Red Leg Zeph, the famous pirate from the Grand Line. Even in this condition, even without his leg, he's easy to recognize," the doctor insisted feverishly, taking a defensive step back. "The Marines will know about him being brought here sooner or later. There's nothing I can do." Luffy outright growled, his fists tightening, and the doctor backed off even more. However, his only escape route was blocked by the blonde man. "TCH, Law clicked his tongue, clearly irritated. His eyes narrowed into furious slits as he glared at the doctor. "This is why I hate hospitals. No one ever cares about patients in these places. Pirates or not, they need help," the giant added. The man heaved a deep sigh, lifting his hand to rub his forehead. "Look," he said in a defeated voice. "I can withhold informing the Marines till tomorrow, but that's it. The boy is in a stable condition now, so I suggest you take him with you and leave the Pira." "Shut up." It was uttered in a quiet voice, almost whispered by Luffy, but Sanji felt his hair stand on end, and he wasn't even a recipient of that order. The doctor seemed to freeze in his spot, the color draining from his face. His eyes were like saucers, unadulterated fear swimming in them. Luffy leveled a death glare at the man. "We don't leave our own behind," he stated after a moment, "no matter what." The tension in the room was palpable. The air seemed to thicken, and its pressure weighted more heavily on everyone's shoulders. The atmosphere was so brittle that it threatened to snap any moment into something uncontrollable and violent. The blonde giant's sigh finally broke it. "Boys," he prompted. "We'll leave," Law hissed, tapping the sword against his shoulder and inevitably drawing the man's terrified eyes on it. "You better keep your word and don't snitch on us till tomorrow." "Why yes," the doctor squeaked. He immediately darted through the door when the opportunity presented itself. The blonde leaned against the wall and slid down, plopping on the floor. He absent-mindedly started rummage through the inner pockets, earning a disapproving scowl from the teen. "No smoking, Kora-san," he chided. The man froze like a child caught with his hand in a cookie jar. His mouth stretched into a sheepish smile as he quickly pulled his hand from inside the coat and rubbed the back of his neck. Sorry. Law rolled his eyes. Luffy clutched the corner of the teen's hoodie, helplessly staring up at him. With small and pleading voice, he mumbled, "Trafi." A flicker of concern crossed Law's face as he glanced at the boy before a warm smile replaced it. He pushed the straw hat from Luffy's head with his free hand and ruffled his hair. "Hey, everything's fine," he spoke softly. "You have me, and you trust your brother, don't you?" The younger Raven perked up. "Of course. Once Ace and Sabo collect the bounty money, I'm gonna buy all the necessary medical supply and we'll be good to go. Quit worrying. I told you that nobody is dying on my watch." Luffy beamed. "Okay, still, was it a good idea to threaten the doctor?" Corazon wondered. Law looked at him with disbelief. said the man who had destroyed all hospitals he visited back in the North Blue. A light hue of pink spread across the man's cheeks. After a moment he cleared his throat. That was different, he defended himself. Why would Kora-san destroy hospitals? Luffy asked curiously. What? You don't know? Law shot back, raising an amused eyebrow. It was quite rare for the little menace not know something about their past. He tried to find a doctor who would treat me. But the moment they heard that it was Amber Lead, they all freaked out, called me a monster, and tried to kill me. Luffy's face darkened. Jerks, agreed, the blonde muttered. Besides, if Marines come, we can just beat them, Law stated nonchalantly. I know you can, Corazon sighed. But it would attract too much unnecessary attention. We can be subtle about it. Law's and Corazon's eyes were blown wide, their jaws slackening as they gawked at Luffy. Who are you and what did you do to Luffy? Both demanded at the same time. Oi! I can be subtle when I want to. The proclamation pushed the two of them into merry laughter. Luffy crossed his arms in front of him with a pout. I can, he huffed. Yeah, sure, the teen agreed with a grin, giving another fond ruffle to his younger brother's black mop. Watching the three of them interact, Sanji didn't notice tears that gathered in his eyes. So, this was how real family looked like. They comforted, defended, and playfully teased each other. They laughed, fought, and spent time together. Definitely nothing like. Sanji mentally shook himself. Now was not the time to think about that, if there even was a good time for such a thing. So, are you bounty hunters or outlaws? The trio looked at the old pirate in the bed, meeting his intense stare. Law smirked. The Pirate King, the son of Gold D. Roger, the runaway noble, the strayed mink, the survivor of Flevance, hunted by one of the most powerful pirate in the world, said pirate's younger brother who also was a deserter from the navy, and a bunch of kids that their little pirate king deemed nakama and recruited to his crew, definitely outlaws, he replied, currently doing some bandit cleaning duty. And why would a group of outlaws care this much about two random starving people? Zeph inquired. Who are you exactly? Luffy reached for his straw hat and poo, tipping it a bit forward. Only his grin was visible as it grew into a perfect D shape. I'm Monkey D. Luffy, the Pirate King, he introduced before pointing at the boy in the bed next to the window. And Sanji's nakama. Everyone glanced at Sanji. Startled blue eyes met theirs. Luffy's smile amplitude immediately cranked up past the million. Sanji, he cheered. Wah! The boy coughed feebly, getting the feeling of his own voice back. Why? I don't know you. Doesn't matter, the straw-hatted boy declared. You're the cook in my crew. That's what's most important. Sanji blinked. It was delivered as a mere fact, in the same manner as if saying the sky was blue and grass was green. Huh? Zeph let out a deep rumbling laughter. What a selfish pirate king, he commented with a crooked smile. You have no idea, Corazon and Law groaned together. She. But a king who cares about his subjects, he trailed off, eyes glazing over as he reminisced about something. I can accept that. Ace pushed his cowboy hat up with one of his fingers so that he could look at the 5-story building in front of him. Walls were painted blue, and a big signboard with a seagull and Marine written under was attached to it between 3rd story's windows. So, this is Marine headquarters in the East Blue? Sabo wondered next to Ace. His hand was holding the brim of his top hat so that it wouldn't fall down as he also gazed at the house. Not really that grand. The freckled raven snorted, adjusting a bag thrown over his shoulder. That was true. This building was neither impressive nor imposing. Doesn't matter, he said. Let's just hope that they'll pay the money for all our bounties. They entered the base and quickly walked to the free reception desk. There were only a few people milling about. 2 scruffy men stared at the board of bounty posters and whispered something among themselves in sharp hisses as if arguing. The woman was filling some papers at the other reception desk with a boy of Ace's and Sabo's age sitting on the chair next to her and seemingly bored out of his mind. A couple Marines working behind their respective desks, and an old man cleaning the floor. Hello, Sabo greeted the Marine. A toothy smile instantly appeared on his face, giving him that childishly charming and innocent look. The man glanced at the 2 kids lazily. Hi, are you here to report something? No, Ace replied as he hefted the bag on the reception desk and opened it, revealing its content. We're here to collect bounty money, Sabo said at the same time putting 3 bounty posters next to the bag. The Marine gawked at the 3 heads which in return were glaring at him. All people present stared at the scene with wide eyes. "What you looking at, eh?" one of the heads snapped. "Wanna fight?" The other one rolled his eyes. "Like you could fight in this condition." "I can do headbutts," the first head huffed angrily. "Ah!" The third head suddenly yelled out, startling everyone. "Something just bit me in my ass. Shit, that hurts." "Shut up!" Ace bonked the screaming bandit, causing him to bite his tongue, and then looked at the Marine expectantly. "Can we get our money?" The Marine sprang from his chair like he was electrocuted. "JJ, just wait," he stuttered out, immediately scrambling out of the room with a shout, Captain." Few minutes later, a female Marine entered the room with the receptionist in tow. She was wearing a light blue formal outfit, a captain's coat draped over her shoulders, with a sandy blonde hair tied into a loose bun. She quickly swept the entire room with her eyes and scowled at the 2 kids and 3 separate heads. The captain wasn't shocked though. She transferred here from the main HQ in the Grand Line, so it wasn't the strangest sight she had ever witnessed. Though, to see a devil fruit user in the East Blue was still quite surprising. "Are you the ones who brought these bounties down?" the captain asked as she walked to the desk, her gaze quickly flickering through all 3 posters on it. "Of course not," Sabo confessed with a smile. "We're just kids. Our older brother and adoptive father caught them all. We're just helping guard the bounties." "Why they aren't here?" "While traveling we found a starving boy on one of the Bear Rock Islands. He's shipwrecked there. Luckily we were passing by and rescued him. Kora-san and our oldest brother brought him to the hospital while we offered to help by collecting money for their work and guarding the rest of the captives on our ship," Sabo explained smoothly. The female Marine blinked. "The rest of the captives?" "Yeah, we still have 7 bounties, with bodies attached." The silence in the room was deafening. All of us were found by Kora-san and adopted by him. "We're a big family and we need quite a sum of belly to buy food, clothes, blankets, medical supplies, and all other necessities," the blonde continued. The smile was still plastered on his face, and his tone was polite and sincere. "While we're already learning how to fight to protect ourselves and help our dad, only our oldest brother follow him to the job. Despite that, everyone pulls their own weight in our family. Even our cute little brother help with small jobs that are suitable for him." Sabo talked and talked and talked, telling how Kora-san found their oldest brother when he was sick and nursed him to health. How he himself was abused by his real parents, ran away from home and was eventually found by Kora-san too. How they met Ace, who was just a wild boy abandoned in the jungles. Ace swore to himself to kick Sabo's ass for that story. How they saved a mink, the member of the Grand Line tribe, kidnapped by the pirates, and welcomed him into their ragtag family. And finally how they discovered an orphaned boy in the bandit's nest where he was kept to do chores and usually kept locked up, even though he was only an adorable small kid who couldn't hurt a butterfly. At this point, the room was already crowded by people, civilians and Marines alike, most of them crying and sniffling, moved by everything these boys went through, and muttering in awe what a great guy this Kora was. Sabo didn't stop there. Speaking in half-truths and half-fantasies, he winded a tearful life story of their everyday struggles to survive, added Zoro and Sanji into the mix for a good measure, and once all the listeners were bawling their eyes out, he ended it all with a blink of his big, dewy blue eyes and an innocent question. "So, can we get the bounty money?" The female captain was also moved by the story, but at least managed to compose herself enough not to cry. She instantly snapped out of her emotional state, straightened up, and commanded her soldiers, "Commander, get a group of men to help detain all these criminals. Lieutenant, take care of these 3 bounties." "Yes, ma'am," both men chorused together, saluting. "Boys," she turned to Sabo and Ace, smiling kindly. "Once we get all your captives in custody, we will pay down the grand total for them all right?" They both grinned. "Yeah." Luffy stepped through the door and looked around. The roof was empty. The hospital was one of the highest buildings in the Logia town, and bustling city panorama opened before him. He walked to the faraway edge and sat down cross-legged. Luffy watched Logia town for a while, observing people scurrying around in a rush or strolling slowly, enjoying the warm and sunny day. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes. The city noise gradually faded into nothingness, leaving the young pirate king suspended in a bubble of silence. And when he heard it, the voice. Heard was a term used loosely here, because the voice never uttered words or sentences. Instead, it conveyed intentions, purposes, and impressions. Most of it was diluted, only bleak, tired wisps of all the houses and pavement, stomped by thousands of feet every day. Some of them were more vivid, expressed by the objects that were more loved and cared for. And very rarely, the voice would ripple with echoes of profound that evolved sentience and the soul of their own. Luffy tilted his head slightly to the side, surprised by hearing two such ripples in Logatown. One was speaking of rage and massacre, accompanied by an unhealthy amount of bloodlust and permeated with murderous intent. It was a distant echo, but it seemed like the voice was talking inside his head, whispering at the back of his mind, tempting to act, to kill, to slaughter. Luffy's lips curled into a wry smile. Always awake, endlessly craving to devour the weak and unprepared, Sandai Kitetsu was as wild and bloodthirsty as he remembered. The same sword that sung from pure satisfaction in his first mate's hand, cleaving through the mob and bathing in the blood of their enemies. The same sword that roared out all its excruciating fury the moment some random marine picked it up, overjoyed by the opportunity to obtain a trophy of the infamous pirate hunter after he fell in battle. The same sword that brought victory to them that day by slaying hundreds of marines and eventually falling into deep slumber. The indomitable cursed blade that Zoro managed to tame and make his most trusted ally. Luffy was definitely eager to obtain it before leaving. When he focused on the second ripple, it soaked him in familiar warmth and the sound of burning fire. The voice carried the impression of flames and ashes, and Luffy's heart quickened as a bright grin grew on his face. He felt excited. He didn't think that he would find it so soon and in Logatown of all places. Luffy. The boy opened his eyes and looked over his shoulder. He already knew that Ace and Sabo had been waiting for a few minutes, undecided whether to disturb him or not. Did everything go well with collecting the money? Luffy asked as he stood up to speak with his brothers face to face. Yep, Sabo replied with a pleased smile. He made them all cry, Ace deadpanned. Luffy cocked his head to the side, confused. Cry? Ha 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 ha, the blonde laughed, rubbing the back of his neck sheepishly. It worked better than I thought it would. Sabo was scary there, the freckled raven admitted, eyeing his brother warily. Sabo shot a brief glare his way. Anyway, he said forcefully, looking back at Luffy. Law took the money and went to buy medical supplies. He said that we need to leave tomorrow at the latest? Luffy's face darkened. Yeah, he said, frowning. Before that, I want to pick a few things in the town. Where's Zoro? He's guarding the ship. The young pirate king thought for a bit, and then muttered. Well, I can always grab Sandai Kitetsu later. He started to walk to the exit before turning around to call for his brothers. Come on, Ace, Sabo, let's go. Two preteens glanced at each other, puzzled by Luffy's mischievous grin. Where are we going? Ace asked curiously as they followed the younger boy through the door and down the staircase. To pick up the devil fruit. The eyes of both boys widened. Devil fruit? Sabo echoed, while Ace at the same time inquired, what kind? Luffy hopped over the last few stairs and burst outside, already listening from where the voice was calling, this way. Almost an hour later, three boys were panting with their hands on their knees, trying to catch their breaths after running the whole way here. Luffy managed to even out his breathing first, and he regarded the mansion in front of him with his eyes shining in delight. Sabo looked around. Luxurious mansions with their perfectly mowed lawns, fancy gardens, and fenced yards flanked both sides of the wide, cobbled street. Not a single person walked it as far as he could see. The blonde scrunched his face in distaste. The view of this place was too familiar, too suffocating, too painful. Why are we here? He asked, his voice easily betraying his anxiety and irritation. Ace shot him a strange glance. Luffy pointed at the mansion he was staring at and cheerfully exclaimed, the fruit is there. Oh, so how we're gonna? Sabo trailed off when he saw the younger raven suddenly stretch his arms and grab the top of the fence. Whoa, wait, he yelled in alarm. Ace also noticed Luffy's actions. Shit! They both grabbed onto their little brother, trying to stop him, but the latter's arms snapped back, sending all three soaring through the air at high speed. They flew through the window on the second floor, across the whole room and crashed into the wall, destroying it in the process. When the cloud of dust settled down, debris moved and 3 heads popped out of it. She. You moron, Ace yelled, smacking the little idiot upside his head. Sabo climbed from the remnants of the wall and blew the air out of his lungs. Well, I guess that's one way to break and enter, he commented coolly while dusting himself off and looking around. His gaze fell on a glass display on the other side of the room. We should hurry up before people show up here, Ace grumbled, pushing the rubble away to free himself. Hey, Luffy, isn't that the fruit you were talking about? Luffy looked at Sabo, then followed his gaze to the display, and his face lit up. There it was, a round orange fruit, composed of many flame-shaped components with swirl patterns on each one, and a swirled stem on the top. Flame fruit. Ace's devil fruit. Yep. The straw-hatted boy cried out, leaping out of the debris and rushing to the display. So, what kind of fruit is this? Ace asked again as he and Sabo stopped right behind their brother. Luffy punched the glass and picked up the devil fruit with one hand. This is the flame fruit, a logia-type devil fruit that allows the user to create, control, and transform into fire at will, he explained, extending the fruit towards them. A very powerful one. One of you should eat it. Sabo raised his eyebrow at Luffy's statement, then noticed how Ace's eyes simmered with interest. He folded his arms. I don't want it, he declared. Really? The freckled raven asked, barely concealing his excitement. Sabo smirked. I'd rather save your drowning asses than become one myself. Suit yourself, Ace huffed, snatching it from Luffy. Flame fruit sounds cool. I'm definitely gonna kick the creep's ass with this. He took a big bite, chew on it a bit, and then suddenly paled. He struggled between throwing it up and swallowing it. Eventually, the prospect of beating Law won, and Ace gulped it down. It's disgusting, he growled, glaring at the rest of the fruit. Sabo burst into merry laughter. Ace, Luffy called. His brow was furrowed and his eyes were intense as he stared at his older brother. Fire is dangerous. It can hurt and it can kill. Before you take full control of your fruit's power, I'll be the only one to spar with you. Ace held his gaze before nodding. Okay, he agreed. As much as he wanted to beat Law, he didn't want to hurt him or anyone else. He glared at the fruit again. Do I need to eat all of it? Nope. One bite is enough. At that moment, a group of armed men stormed into the room. They lined up and cocked their guns at the intruders, not even blinking at the fact that it was just 3 kids. The group parted, allowing a pompous noble to step through. He opened his mouth to say something, but when he saw the bitten devil fruit in Ace's hand his jaw dropped and eyes bulged out. Kill them all, he ordered, his face flushing red with anger. I want them all dead. Oh, they finally found us, Sabo remarked nonchalantly. It took them a while. Luffy chuckled. Time to run away. In a blink of an eye, the 3 brothers jumped through the broken window, smoothly landed on the ground and bolted. Whoa, this is the 2nd floor, one of the soldiers exclaimed. Damn it, after them. After them. The noble roared and the group scrambled to catch up. Luffy, Ace, and Sabo were leisurely strolling through Logia Town, chatting and laughing. Here they are. Catch them. They turned around to see the noble and armed group of soldiers gaining on them. How did they find us? Ace gritted his teeth. Sabo grabbed Luffy's hand and dragged him with him. Can't we just beat them up? The younger raven complained. If we want to keep a low profile, we can't, the blonde explained, causing Luffy to pout. They ran for a few minutes, but soldiers didn't want to give up. Suddenly, the towering figure of Khorasan appeared in the crowd ahead, and Sabo's face lit up. I have an idea, he exclaimed. Luffy, can you pretend to cry? You know, like a real 8 years old? Ace whipped his head to look at Sabo like he was crazy. Luffy and pretend in one sentence, Sabo? The blonde's face blanked out before his palm hit his forehead in realization. Ah, you're right. Luffy scowled at them. It was true that previously he couldn't lie to save his life, but not anymore. During all those years on the run, his nakama, mostly Robin, taught him a lot of things. He learned from the best. Luffy just chose not to lie. I can, he stated in such a serious tone, that the other 2 boys were taken aback. Without waiting for their replies, Luffy kicked off the ground, increasing his speed, and darted through all the people towards Koro-san. "Dod!" he screamed in a teary voice, slamming into the man's leg and hugging it for dear life. Ace and Sabo almost tripped in surprise as they heard it. They shared a wide-eyed glance, unable to believe that Luffy, their idiot, overpowered little brother with nothing but a fantasy-filled head, could actually act so well. But this was not a time to think about that. They both skidded to a halt in front of Corazon and Beppo, turning around to face their pursuers. Corazon, though, was caught completely off guard by Luffy's actions. His body froze, and mind stopped functioning with the word, "Dad," going on an endless loop. He stiffly looked down at the kid. A cigarette fell from his open mouth when he registered that Luffy was probably crying. Crying? Luffy was crying. Who the hell dared to make his boy cry? Just as the soldiers and, surprisingly, a noble finally came closer, Sabo yelled at the top of his lungs, "Stop chasing us, you pervert! Stop forcing yourself on our little brother!" Pursuers gaped at him, while the whole street snapped their attention at the scene, dissatisfied whispers spreading among them. "What? Forcing yourself on the little boy?" screamed a woman as she pushed her young daughter behind her. "A pervert!" another woman shouted, horrified. "What do you want from these kids?" a man with 2 little kids of his own demanded. "See what he did to my little brother," Sabo exclaimed, pointing at Luffy who had his face buried in Corazon's leg. "This pervert scarred him for life." "That's not true," the noble sputtered, finding himself as the main target of dozens of infuriated glares from the crowd. Forcing yourself on Luffy?" Corazon muttered, his face twisting into an ugly, dark expression. This kind of act was unforgivable, Luffy yelped when Corazon suddenly scooped him into his arms and pressed him securely against his chest. "They are thieves!" the noble screamed, red-faced, pointing at Ace and Sabo. Corazon appeared in front of him in that instant, his eyes burning with unfathomable rage. The man shivered and gulped nervously. "Why you? What do you want?" The blonde lashed out with his leg and landed a kick right between the man's legs with a sickening cracking sound. The noble's face contracted and paled, his whole body froze, arms blindly trying to soothe the damaged parts before he fell down, moaning and writhing in pain. Everyone cringed. A life-changing injury for sure. Luffy watched the noble, then buried his face into the blonde's neck. His whole body trembled in his struggle to stifle the laughter. Corazon just scoffed at the man, gently patting Luffy over his back, comforting him. HMPF. He had it coming. That's what you get trying to force yourself on a child. Beppo was completely confused on what was happening. Ace and Sabo watched the scene stupefied. None of them expected Koro-san to go full righteous Avenger mode on the man because of their lies. What's happening here? A crowd parted and a group of Marines stepped in, led by the female captain Ace and Sabo already had met. "Those people are trying to force themselves on these boys," someone yelled. "Yeah. Arrest these perverts. How are we supposed to let our children walk our town streets if this kind of person harms kids in the middle of daylight?" The captain frowned, looking at the lying noble, his soldiers, then at Corazon, and the boys around him. Sabo flashed a grin when their eyes met, and she blinked in surprise. Her eyes went back up again to stare at Corazon for a bit longer. "Can someone tell me what exactly happened? We brought our little brother to sightsee," Sabo began, motioning to Luffy in Corazon's arms. "When we were walking around, having fun, that man," he pointed accusingly at the noble, "burst through the gates of a nearby mansion with a bunch of his guards and tried to grab my little brother." Another wave of angry, heated murmurs rolled throughout the surrounding crowd. "We got scared, so we took Luffy and ran, but that pervert kept chasing us." Lying, the noble squeezed out, his voice definitely a few octaves higher than it was before. They stole FR and it tem and F fled. The female marine rolled her eyes. "And how had these little kids managed to flee from your security?" "They jumped from the 2nd floor window," one of the soldiers exclaimed, trying to help his boss. "Really?" The captain looked back at the kids and they just blinked innocently at her. "That's bullshit. I'll be disappointed if you believe this pervert, Marines. Just leave those boys alone. Yeah, arrest that pervert." Sabo turned to Beppo, quickly whispered something into his ear, and pushed him closer to the female captain. The mink tugged her coat. Once she looked down at him, he shyly asked, "You believe us, right?" The captain stared at him, her face blank, but a light hue of pink slowly spreading across her cheeks. After a moment, she coughed into her fist, composing herself, pointed at the noble and his entourage, and ordered, "Men, arrest these criminals." "Yes, ma'am." Happy cheers exploded as the Marines packed the sputtering offenders and led them away. "So, this is your father, boys?" the captain asked, smiling gently. "Yeah," Sabo confirmed without skipping a beat. "Sir, I really admire your work and what you do for these boys," the woman said respectfully, giving a slight bow to the bewildered Corazon. "Please, have a nice stay in our town." Thank you." People also started to disperse, but not before praising the boys for protecting their little brother and giving thumbs up to Corazon for educating his kids so well. The blonde just nodded, absolutely clueless about what was even happening. Sabo glanced left and right. Noticing an empty alley not far from where they were standing, he motioned for their group to move there. Just as they stepped into it, Luffy couldn't hold himself any longer and melted into a loud fit of laughter. Sabo and Ace grinned and high-fived each other. "So, what exactly happened?" Corazon asked. Seeing that Luffy was actually more than okay and definitely not stressed or in need of crying, he put him back on his feet. "He caught us in breaking and entering," Sabo informed dryly. "And stealing," Ace added in the same nonchalant tone. "And destroying his house," Luffy chimed in merrily. "That was just you," Ace and Sabo yelled at him. Corazon blinked. "So, you really stole something from him?" "It's Ace's devil fruit," Luffy cheered. "So, you were all acting?" Beppo inquired. "I thought it was weird that you didn't simply beat them up." Sabo shrugged. "It would have brought us unnecessary attention." Corazon felt lightheaded. "Acting?" he asked, looking in disbelief at Luffy, who grinned at him. "Oh. So calling him Dad and Father was just an act, obviously." His shoulders slumped. He'd be lying to himself if he said that he wasn't disappointed. "And devil fruit?" Ace, now as a EU fruit user, smirked. Corazon sighed and grabbed a new cigarette from his pocket, thinking that even God couldn't save the world from these kids now. Of course, there was no way for him to know that God already got his own ass kicked by Luffy once, and would experience the same fate yet again in the future. She. Ace suddenly felt an itch in his nose. He sneezed and instantly burst into flames. "Ah! Ace is on fire!" Corazon screamed in panic, his newly lit cigarette falling on the ground once more. "Water, we need water." Dawn Island, Goa Kingdom. Outlook 3 pulled a small, round watch from his pocket and flicked it open. Taking in the time, he furrowed his brow, irritated. It was already late evening. The park where he waited was almost empty. Only a few civilians wandered around, mostly couples, chatting and chuckling among themselves. Outlook 3 tapped his foot against the stone path when he finally saw a tall, middle-aged, muscled man coming towards him. He wore sleeveless t-shirt and pants, colored in camouflage patterns, and heavy combat boots. A big hunting knife was attached to his belt together with crossbow and bolt holster. "A mercenary through and through, sir," the man greeted in a monotone. Outlook 3 snared in disgust. He was truly falling low, forced to associate with these kind of people. "Your money," he said, throwing the mercenary a purse, jingling with coins. The man easily caught it, opened it and looked inside. Satisfied, he tied it to his belt. "Do you have a photo?" "Yes," the noble replied, pulling out a small photo and giving it to the man. "I don't care how you do it, find him. He's somewhere on this island, I just know it." "What if he's staying with someone?" Outlook 3 pursed his lips. "Accidents do happen." The mercenary's mouth stretched into a savage grin as he pushed the photo in the back pocket. "Don't worry, my team will find your son." "You better." And with that, Outlook 3 turned around and quickly walked away. He glowered at nothing in particular and muttered under his breath, voice dripping with venom, "You're costing me more than you're worth, Sabo. You shouldn't waste the kindness of others." Luffy, Usopp, 8, Nami, 9, Zoro, Sanji, 10, Beppo, Ace, Sabo, 11, Law, 15 y.o. Luffy, Zoro, and Law were gazing at the open wooden gates in front of them. A tall wooden fence enclosed the whole perimeter of the yard with several buildings and a neat garden surrounding them. A signboard above the entrance stated that this was Seikeiken Dojo. It's bigger than Isshin Dojo, Zoro said in awe. Luffy tilted his head, puzzled. I remember it being in a shop, not a dojo, he mumbled under his breath. Law glanced at the younger Raven. After a moment, he carefully commented, you never know where things or people might end up in the future. A small, knowing smile touched the corners of Luffy's mouth. You're right, Law, the boy agreed easily. Let's go inside. The teen narrowed his eyes at his youngest brother's back, but said nothing more and followed soon after. They crossed the garden and entered the dojo. The hall was well lit and clean with incense filling the air, practice swords and other tools tidily organized in the corner. There was a man kneeling behind a small table in one corner, frowning at the sheet of paper in his hand. His face was stern. A few gray strands were mixed between his dark hair, and the right sleeve of his royal blue kimono was lying flat at the side. The man was missing his whole arm. The stranger looked up at the kids, his gaze lingering on Law's nodashi for a bit longer, and a few more wrinkles joined his frown. Come with parents if you want to join the dojo, he said dismissively, returning back to glaring at the paper. Not here to join, Luffy responded. We're here for the sword. The man's eyes snapped up at them again, but none of the three boys seemed to be intimidated by his sharp and keen glower. He put the paper down on the table with a sigh. Has Hien sent children to do his bidding now? He wondered, a barely perceptible anger layering his voice. Go back and tell him that I haven't changed my mind and the sword is still not for sale. The trio stared at him blankly. Luffy folded his arms and tilted his head to the side, furrowing his brow, as he usually did when he was confused about something. Who's that? He asked. And who are you, Osan? The dojo master was taken aback by his words. He scrutinized the kids for a while, his expression giving away a feeling that he knew that they were much more than his eyes could perceive. If you're not here on Hygen's orders, he spoke carefully, what sword are you talking about? Sandai Kitetsu, Luffy replied as he looked at the furthermost cupboard with a small grin. The man followed his line of sight and his eyes widened. How do you know about it? It's Zoro's sword, of course, I know about it, the boy responded with a distinct, well, duh, tone. Law couldn't help but smile in amusement. You know, this isn't how you convince people of something. But it's the truth. Zoro scowled at the youngest boy. Is that sword as good as you say? He asked skeptically. If you can control it, Luffy said, scrunching his face a bit in displeasure. It may be a bit too much of a jerk for you right now. Too much of a jerk? The young swordsman blinked at the younger boy. You understand that you're talking about a sword, right? Luffy glanced at him, and the corner of his mouth twitched up. You'll understand once you have it in your hands. He turned back to the man, who observed them in silence, and asked, Hey, can we buy it? The dojo master stayed quiet, his gaze calculating and contemplating. I already told you that it's not for sale, he finally said. Luffy's jaw dropped. After a moment, he scratched his head. Well, that's a problem. We have money, Law informed. The man sighed. Money is not the issue here, he admitted, his hand unconsciously brushing along the empty kimono sleeve. Sandai Kitetsu is the cursed sword. It's too dangerous. Luffy, didn't you say that this is also the cursed sword? Law asked after a short pause as he brought his nodashi forward and frowned at it, ignoring the dojo master's surprised, what? Feels like an ordinary blade to me. Yep, Luffy answered nonchalantly. But Kikoku is different. Besides, it's still sleeping. Once it wakes up, you'll know. How intriguing, Law said softly with a smirk forming on his lips. He stared at his weapon for a bit longer, then put it back on his shoulder. Well, it feels right to have it. Of course it does, the little pirate king cheered. You're not Trafi without Kikoku, your cool attitude, and tattoos. Law scowled at his little brother and simply stared with the unreadable look in his eyes. Tattoos? Huh? He murmured thoughtfully. He was thinking about getting some body art done on himself, but hadn't told anyone about it yet. Nevertheless, he didn't comment, just flicked Luffy's forehead, eliciting a joyous, she. You kids, who are you? The man asked, watching them in disbelief. Luffy put his hand on the top of the straw hat and grinned, wide and bright. I'm on. Hirotata-san. A yell suddenly echoed throughout an empty dojo as the door was ripped open and a group of men entered like they owned the place. Each of them sported mocking smiles on their faces and had katanas either in their hands or attached to their waists. Hien, the dojo master, Hirotada, growled. There was a distinct undertone of animosity, and as he slowly rose up, even his body language betrayed hostility towards the group. The burly guy in front laughed. Hirotada-san, he said again, sarcasm dripping from his voice. I'm gonna get that sword from you today. Over my dead body. What can you do with only one arm? The man laughed again, grabbing his katana to unsheath it, but stopped when he noticed 3 kids gawking at him. His mouth stretched into a menacing grin. Oh, you even have such cute pupils here. Are you sure that you don't want to give that useless sword to me? Hirotada gritted his teeth. They are not my pupils, just random kids that wandered in here. Don't touch them. Luffy hummed with his arms behind his head, the picture of relaxed indifference. They remind me of those guys we met on your island, Zoro. The green-haired boy rolled his eyes. At least I know now that you can't be taken as a hostage. Law raised an eyebrow at Zoro. Taken as a hostage? TCH, I thought that he was in danger, little bastard. Luffy laughed, as carefree as the wind. Stop ignoring me, the burly man roared, drawing his sword and slashing it at the smallest kid. Watch out, Hirotada yelled in alarm, grabbing his own katana from under the table, but there was no way that he would be fast enough to protect the boys. Law's eyes flashed with a chilling murderous intent. Kikoku easily slid from its sheath and met the blade of the enemy with a sharp ding. While I know that there is no way weaklings like you would ever even touch a hair on Luffy's head, he said in a dangerously low voice as he effortlessly pushed the attacker away. But as an older brother, I don't take kindly to anyone threatening him. He smiled, vicious and unforgiving, and lifted his left hand with an energy already swirling under his palm. Room. The moment the blue transparent bubble stopped expanding, Law swung his blade several times through the air in front of him. Everyone, except Luffy who grinned and Zoro who folded his arms with a huff, stared at him in confusion, unable to understand what he was actually doing. The cursed no dashi went back into its sheath with a soft click. That's when the world tilted for Hien and his goons and their bodies fell apart. We were cut. What the hell is going on? Ah, save me. Hearing them all scream, Law's smile sharpened into an evil one. Let's play, he said softly. As body parts started flying around followed by terrified cries, Zoro tsked. Damn it, he muttered. I wish I had my swords with me. Luffy tore his eyes from the torsos, flailing limbs, and screaming heads getting attached to the walls of the F Macabre gallery, and looked at his swordsman. Why don't you have them? Sabo took them away, Zoro grumbled. Said something about our cover story and that it would be bad if Marines saw me with them. But he's right. It's better not to get Marines' attention until we get Sanji and Cook Osan out of here. HMPH. I already got everything I need to get the both of them on their feet. Law chimed in as the room disappeared and he turned around to face the other 2 boys with the last head resting on his palm. We need to pick some extra stuff as we go back, and then we can leave whenever. Cool. Zoro eyed the head, looking slightly disturbed, but didn't comment. Law walked towards the dojo master. The latter hadn't moved or said anything from the moment the teen blocked Hygen's attack, just stared at the 3 kids with an unreadable expression. When Hygen's separate head landed on his table with a thud and a tirade of curses from its mouth, Hirotada's gaze flickered down at it and his brow furrowed. Apologize for making a mess, Law ordered coldly, bonking the head with the tip of Kikoku's sheath. It was you who made the mess, the man shouted back, momentarily forgetting his current predicament. The evil smile returned with a vengeance together with a dark, amused gleam in those amber eyes. Ooh, you wish to be cut into even smaller pieces, don't you, Hien-ya? The thug blanched, wide eyes following the teen's hand slowly rising towards his sword's hilt, and he immediately squeaked, sorry. Law dropped his arm back to his side with a scoff. Who are you, kids? Hirotada asked again. Luffy stepped beside his older brother, a brilliant grin stretching under the straw hat. I'm Monkey D. Luffy, the Pirate King. Roronoa Zoro, the green-haired boy grunted. Law was silent for a second as if considering something. Trafalgar D. Waterlaw. The man's eyes widened. 2 Ds. And then he suddenly burst into a merry laughter. The 3 boys simply blinked at him. The mirth died out as quickly as it started and Hirotada brushed the back of his hand across his eyes. Is it fate? He wondered in a whisper. Must be. He looked at the kids again, his gaze alight with resolve. Putting back the katana under the table, he motioned them to follow him. Nay, Osan, you really won't sell us Sandai Kitetsu? Luffy inquired as they walked across the hall. I already told you that it's not for sale, the dojo master replied. Luffy's face fell, but before he could say anything, the man spoke again. But you can have Sandai Kitetsu free of charge. The straw-hatted boy started. Huh? Free of charge? Law echoed, eyes narrowing in suspicion. Yes, Hirotada confirmed without skipping a beat. He opened the cupboard and took out a long package, rolled up in a red cloth. I believe it can finally do something good in the hands of D's companion. Luffy grinned at his words. Zoro accepted the package and carefully unwrapped the cloth to reveal a sheath of a deep red color and a reddish-brown sword hilt with golden tsuba and pommel. The moment Zoro touched it, he felt it calling out to him, inviting and seducing to set it free, to draw it. Without really realizing what he was doing, his fingers curled tightly around the hilt and pulled the sword half out of its sheath. The light blade sat nicely in his grip, perfect length and weight to slash and cut, to murder and slaughter, to dye the streets with the blood of the innocent. A dominant willpower suddenly pressed down on Zoro and the whispers in the back of his mind receded. But as much as he wanted to let go of that accursed sword, he couldn't. A sweat broke on the young swordsman's forehead as he struggled to keep himself from succumbing to those dark temptations. A hand landed gently on the top of his. Another wave of the familiar power washed over him, and the whispers hushed completely. Zoro lifted his head, meeting the intense black eyes staring at him. Luffy, he choked out, his body shaking from such an unexpected experience. Sorry, Zoro, Luffy said earnestly. He pried his nakama's fingers from Sandai Kitetsu, pushed it back into its sheath and then rewrapped into the cloth again. I haven't realized just how strong it is for you right now. He observed the other boy, a worried crease in his brow. You okay? Zoro took a few deep breaths to stabilize himself. Yeah, I think so, he mumbled unsurely. He bit his lip. Despite his inability to control such a sword, for that brief moment when he had held it, Zoro felt its untamed terrifying power. A sword with its own soul, such a frightening entity, could either be a curse or a blessing for a swordsman, depending on their knowledge and skills. Finally, reaching a decision, Zoro looked up, meeting Luffy's eyes again. I will get stronger so that I can use this sword, he declared with nothing but pure conviction etched across his features. I swear on my dream of becoming the world's greatest swordsman. Any problems with that, Pirate King? A grin crept onto Luffy's face, stretching from one side to the other, showing every single tooth. Nope. I believe in you, Zoro. He propped Sandai Kitetsu against his shoulder in the same manner as Law had carried his Nodashi, and turned to the dojo master. We'll be going now. Thank you. Zoro turned to the man too and gave a deep bow. Law dipped his head in respectful goodbye, and all three left. Hirotada stared at the door, shocked from encountering such fascinating children. After a minute, he sighed, glanced around his dojo, and grimaced at all the body parts stuck on its walls. What should I do with this mess? Next time Sanji woke up it was already evening. The sun dipped closer to the horizon, painting the sky with a vivid palette of colors of the approaching dusk. The room was empty, save for the old geezer who was sleeping. Those strange boys and their giant companion were gone. Sanji felt his heart clenching. Either they truly were just an illusion or they had already abandoned him. Honestly, he couldn't decide which option was worse. Well, of course, they had abandoned him. He was just a good-for-nothing fail. That's when the door of their room flew open with a bang. The boy flinched, startled, his depressing thoughts puffing out of existence. Luffy dashed in with a dazzling grin plastered across his face, and Sanji's heart spurred into an excited flutter that this straw-hatted whirlwind was real and still around. Time to go, the latter exclaimed cheerfully, sliding to a halt right next to the blonde's bed. His words slowly sunk into Sanji's mind, and his face blanked out. He could barely lift his limbs at this point, not to mention walking anywhere. Go where? He asked as he tried to sit up and would have failed if not for Luffy who propped him against pillows. Home, was the quick reply. The exuberant boy glanced at the others who pushed 2 wheelchairs into the room as they entered, then faced Sanji again, his grin widening beyond the capabilities of a normal human being. We're going home. Home? The concept of home was such a foreign thing to him that for a moment the blonde couldn't even comprehend Luffy's words. What do you mean? Home is home. It's where your family stays most of the time and, currently, that's the Dawn Island. What else I could mean? Am I also, family? Sanji asked quietly, carefully, bracing himself for an inevitable rejection. However, Luffy's smile didn't falter, it actually grew even wider and immeasurably warmer. Of course, the answer was delivered firmly, without any doubt or delay, with a distinct, obviously, undertone. Sanji let out a quiet, oh, because, seriously, what else he could say to that? Careful, Law warned as he helped Corazon transfer Zeph from the bed into the wheelchair. Ace, give me the blanket. Also, can you get that pillow? Sabo came around Zeph's bed with the second wheelchair while Ace snatched the pillow from the bed, and instantly set it on fire. Very nice, Flamebrain, Law quipped, unamused. Hey, not my fault. The Oathheek slightly flushed as he stomped on the burning pillow. It's hard to control. Ha 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 ha. Sabo laughed. You're like Corazon now. Corazon grinned, almost proudly, but Ace wasn't having any of that. I don't set myself on fire. Oh, really? Law asked as he tucked the blanket around the old pirate's legs and straightened up to look at him, his amber eyes shining with mirth. You're on fire right now. Ace glanced at himself and, lo and behold, fire sizzled along his whole left arm. Damn, he cursed silently, willing it away, but then another fire sprung on his right shoulder. His 3 present brothers burst out laughing. Shut it. Even I'm not that bad, Cora said with a smile. You're worse, the brothers yelled together. Am not, the giant blonde defended himself, a hint of blush creeping up his face, and earned another bout of laughter from his boys, this time with Ace joining in. Alright, your turn, Law said as he walked towards Sanji and Luffy, his voice still carrying the cheerful tone. What? No. Wait, little eggplant. Zeph, who was quiet till now, suddenly yelled angrily at him. Sanji flinched, instinctively closing his eyes and hunching on himself as if waiting for a blow. It never came. Surprised and confused, he slowly opened his eyes. You shouldn't waste the kindness of others, Zeph continued the moment he had the boy's attention, like you shouldn't waste food. Tears instantly appeared in Sanji's eyes before he nodded. He would never ever waste food again. He would not waste the kindness of others either. As Luffy pulled him into a much-needed hug, Sanji remembered his sister, her tears and her last words. I think I found them, Reiju, the people you talked about. Next morning, Luffy's and co-temporary ship, the waters of the Polestar Islands. Sanji watched the scene unfold in front of his eyes, trying to collect his jaw from his lap. Zeph next to him had a similar expression, albeit a more composed one. Corazon, standing behind their wheelchairs, seemed unperturbed as he calmly smoked his cigarette. Kamun, not paying any attention to the loud whining, Law licked his finger and flipped a page of the medicine book that he had picked up in Logatown, leaning comfortably against sleeping Beppo in the middle of the deck with his Nodashi safely resting on his shoulder. I know that, I'll do it later. Zoro was sprawled nearby, snoring without a care in a world, hugging all 3 of his swords. Sabo had a bunch of maps spread around him and studied them with a dedicated concentration. Ace was up in the crow's nest, leaning on its railing, and seemed to be dozing off as he observed his youngest brother on the ship's front. We need to get out of here faster because of Marines and there's no wind. And Luffy? Well, Luffy was in a heated argument with his pet sea king. Quinto just grumbled something in return and cocked his nose away and up in a dramatic gesture of, nope. Arg. The boy suddenly groaned in frustration. Fine, he snapped, throwing his hands up in surrender. Belly rubs for pulling our ship it is. Quinto's face lit up and he immediately plopped on his back with a smile. Literally, looking relaxed, content, and happy. Luffy leapt off the ship and onto his belly. With both his arms coated in haki for a stronger effect, he stretched them all the way to the other side, dragging fingers across, and then back, and to the other side again, and back, and to the other side, and back, and... A child with a devil fruit giving belly rubs to a sea king, Zeph muttered in disbelief before laughing. now I've seen it all." Korra breathed out a puff of smoke and smirked while Law, Sabo, and Ace snorted. "No, you haven't," all four said in unison. A week later, Dawn Island, Fuchsia Village. Rust was bored. So far, this mission turned out to be the dullest their elite mercenary group, the Mad Dogs, had ever received. The payment was good, though, so he understood why their boss, Zero Zaniki, accepted it. Find one kid on this single island. Just how hard could it be? The thing was that they couldn't find him. They scoured the whole Goa kingdom from the ground up, inspected every nook and cranny, checked this remote village, and came up empty. The people that lived in the Grey Terminal before it burned down said that they had seen the kid from the photo going out and into the forest. But after combing it back and forth several times they found only a few bandit hideouts. One of them was empty, seemed to be raided a few years back, so they made it their temporary camp. They still couldn't find that goddamn brat. Zeros figured that he must have left the island or burned in the Grey Terminal, and informed the client, but the latter just offered more money and ordered to keep looking. That's why Rust was here in Fuchsia Village, keeping an eye on the pier, bored to death. If the target left the island, he might return, so they posted lookouts in Goa Port and here, just in case. Rust was lifting his bottle of water, damn that Aniki for forbidding sake while on duty, to take a gulp, when he spotted a small vessel sailing towards the shore. It wasn't the first one, so he didn't pay much attention to it until a bunch of kids jumped from the ship the moment it docked. And their target, the blonde brat, was among them. Rust quickly ducked behind the tree he was previously leaning against and pulled a small den mushi out of his pocket. "Aniki, I have eyes on the target," he immediately informed once it connected. "He just came back from outside the island." "Bingo!" Zeros cheered. "Is he alone?" "No, but there's nothing to worry about," the mercenary reported, sneaking behind a building as he followed the merry group through the village. The group consists of 2 adult men, with one of them being an old crippled guy in a wheelchair, a bunch of kids, and a bear cub that seems to tag along with them. The oldest of the kids might pose a slight threat, but others are just brats. The snail's mouth stretched into a wicked smile, reflecting Zero's satisfaction. "Doesn't seem that we'll have a problem then of picking the kid up and delivering him to the client." Rust grinned too, peeking around the corner. The group stopped in front of the bar and the adults went inside. The green-haired boy who carried 3 swords on his back pushed the kid in a wheelchair after them. "Those kids are kinda cute, carrying weapons with them." The mercenary chuckled mockingly before the rest of those cute kids and the bear suddenly turned around and looked straight at him with matching expressions of fierceness. Cursing, Rust hid behind the house. "What is it?" Zeros questioned, alarmed. The man took a breath and spoke while carefully sliding to look around the corner again. "It's no th—" He abruptly ceased talking because one of the kids, the youngest one, with a straw hat on his head, was right in front of him, staring. The others didn't move closer, but were still there, also staring. "Nay, mister," the boy called out, his childish voice light and innocent. "Why are you following us?" "I'm not following you," Rust denied clumsily. "I was, sightseeing." The kid drawled out thoughtfully, putting his arms behind his head in a relaxed posture, watching him. Rust felt those black eyes boring into his face, through his skin and flesh, directly into his soul. Those eyes didn't belong to a child. They were too dark, too intense, too powerful, too dangerous. The eyes of the being that dwelled on the top of the food chain, of the apex predator, staring down at the prey that really wasn't worth its time. Honestly, Rust didn't feel any shame of stumbling a step back. "Is that a problem?" he asked, barely able to keep a tremble out of his voice. "Nope," the boy popped, he paused and his gaze flicked down at the den mushi on the man's palm. "Don't wander up the mountain," he cautioned, his teeth flashing in a feral grin. "You might die." And then the little brat turned around and skipped back to his friends. All disappeared into the bar, but not without sending last warning glares Rust's way. Aniki, Rust exhaled out as he pressed his back against the wall to steady himself, his heart hammering in his ribcage. "We might have a complication." A few hours later, Mount Kalubo, Dayton's bandit hut. Dayton stared. Luffy grinned from ear to ear. Dayton's lips twisted downwards into a frown. Luffy's grin didn't waver in the slightest. Dayton lit up a new cigarette, glowering at the boy. Luffy motioned at Sanji and Zeph behind him and exclaimed, "They're gonna live with us for a while." Deiden gritted her teeth in anger. "Look, brat," she snapped. "The kid is fine. I can't even keep up with you brats multiplying every now and then. One more or one less, there's no difference," she grumbled. "But now you brought an old cripple with you too. You're worse than Garp. This is neither a kindergarten nor a nursing home?" Luffy kept grinning at her. "We're bandits." Luffy's grin brightened even more, and Deiden's stern expression started to falter. "Bandits don't take in kids or elderly. Why is she even trying?" Sabo questioned, shaking his head. "She'll end up accepting whatever Luffy asks anyway," Ace agreed. "Such a pointless endeavor," Law deadpanned. Trying to keep up her image, Beppo also added his 2 cents. Corazon could only smile helplessly at his boys sassing poor Deiden. At least the others had the decency to stay out of it. "You 4 shut up, you 2. Cora," the bandit leader screamed at them, eliciting sniggers from the brothers and a confused, "What did I do?" from their adoptive father. "And you?" She turned to Luffy, ready to drill her point through his thick skull. "They are nakama, Deiden," Luffy declared, beaming with a smile as bright as the sun and powerful enough to stop the world from spinning. "Family, just like you." Deiden capitulated in an instant. After Sanji and Zeph were successfully settled into one of the rooms, so that they could rest in peace, Luffy found Deiden again. The burly woman was drinking sake and smoking and complaining to whoever listened to her about what her hideout and bandit group had turned into. One glance at her and Luffy knew that she was already too drunk to give him answers. He turned to Dagra and Magra who sat nearby, sighing helplessly. "Hey, guys," he greeted them. "How's the situation in the Grey Terminal?" "It burned, like you said," Dagra replied. "How did you know?" "The fire was so big, the sky turned completely red," Magra recalled grimly. "We've never seen anything like that." Luffy frowned, closing his eyes. He had seen a sight like that, and not once or twice. Too many times if you ask him. "Did you warn the people?" he asked, stuffing all those horrible memories somewhere into the darkest corner of his mind. The short bandit heaved a heavy sigh. "Yeah, but only a handful believed us. We even lied that we got the information from a guard we bribed," Magra said with a shake of his head. "Didn't help much." "Well, it's better than doing nothing," Luffy pointed out. "And they wouldn't have believed a kid like me anyways." "Yeah, you good-for-nothing brat," Deiden suddenly chimed in, her words slurring a bit from her drunken state. "Bringing brats here, and more brats, and even more brats, and then the old man. We're bandits, you know." Boss, calm down. We're forced to look after kids like we're some sort of good people. We're bandits, damn it." Luffy observed her with a neutral face. "But you are good people," he finally said softly before his usual grin flared up. "And I love you all." They all froze, staring at him with wide eyes. Deiden turned around, pulling out a handkerchief from under her blouse as a waterfall broke from her eyes. "Go away, you damn rascal," she yelled with a teary voice. Who cares about your opinion?" She. A few days later, the Mad Dog's temporary camp in the abandoned bandit hideout. Zeros tipped back on the rear legs of his chair, threw his feet on the table, put his arms behind his head, and closed his eyes with a sigh. There were few maps and journals spread around on the table, together with a whiskey bottle, a glass with some of the liquor in it, and a middle-sized den mushi. There was no one else in the room at the moment, either resting, preparing food, or cleaning weapons. Lately, the group started to get a bit impatient, wanting nothing more than just storm the place where the target was, grab him, and be done with the mission. Zeros cracked open one eye when he heard soft rustling at the window. A chestnut-colored squirrel ran along the windowsill, then slipped through the crack in the glass and jumped down. "You're early, Pippin," the mercenary boss commented lazily. The squirrel sprinted across the room and darted inside the clothes that were neatly laid down in a corner. Suddenly, it shifted, its form getting bigger. Limbs slid into the sleeves. A head popped through the t-shirt's collar. A moment later, a very short adult man was standing there fully clothed. "Any longer and they would have pinpointed my presence," Pippin replied, smoothing out the wrinkles on his clothes before looking back at the boss with a serious expression on his round, childish face. "Iniki, those kids are the real deal." "Are they as good as Rust claimed them to be?" "Yes, probably better." Zeros raised an eyebrow. Really? Pippin sighed, brushing his hand through his brown hair. I've seen them train, and, believe me, that was not training children do. There are at least 3 devil fruit users among them, 2 paramecias and a fire logia. The other man whistled. Well, if we catch that logia brat off guard, even he can be taken down, he argued. And with him down, the others shouldn't really pose a threat. Not quite, Aniki, the squirrel zone chuckled nervously. The problem is that logia brat is not the most dangerous one. So, the eldest then? No, on the contrary, actually. 2 days ago, all the brats, minus the sickly one, did group training, and… well, they all went against the youngest. Pippin furrowed his brow as if trying to make sense of what he had witnessed. I couldn't even get close enough to observe that fight. It was that intense. But even from afar it was such an amazing sight to behold, he said with a faint odd smile on his face, then fixed his Aniki with a hard stare. None of them pulled any punches either. The logia brat got kicked and was sent flying, literally. He almost crashed into me when he flew past me. The mercenary paused. And all 5 still lost. Honestly, the fight wasn't even fair. A menacing grin spread across Zero's face as he dropped his feet from the table and leaned forward, hungry eagerness sparkling in his dark eyes. Don't wander up the mountain. You might die. Figures that the kid who had the balls to threaten us would be a little monster, he muttered before throwing his head up and laughing loudly. Ha 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 ha. Never could have imagined that we'd run into such monsters when those royals invited us into this backwater island to do the job for them. At least we cashed in nicely from carrying some boxes with explosions around, Pippin added smugly. Zeros laughed again, and that noble jumped in with even more belly. Ah, speaking about money, the zone mercenary said with a greedy grin. I snooped around the bandit's house where those kids live and found a big bag of treasure. Nice, good job, Pippin, the boss praised, and the other man preened. And I know exactly how we go about this without setting those monsters on ourselves. Zeros continued as he pulled the Den Den Mushi closer, took the receiver off, and punched a number in. Several more days later, Dayton's bandit hut. Boys, Cora called out as they all piled at the door to leave. I'm going down to Fuchsia's market. Anything you want me to pick up? Why? Ace asked. We just went there a week ago. The giant blonde took off his apron and hung it on the wall. Zeph-san is a cook and he wrote me a list of food that is good for him and Sanjin boys. His eyes flashed with something that made the kids shudder. That means, fruits and vegetables, he exclaimed gleefully. But I hate vegetables. Luffy whined. Cora put his hands on his hips and pinned the youngest with a stern gaze. If you want to be the Pirate King. I'm already the Pirate King. If you want to continue being the Pirate King, the man corrected himself immediately, you need to grow up as a strong boy. I'm already pretty strong. You need to grow up even stronger. Cora once again adjusted his words, and for that, you can't eat just meat. We've talked about that, Luffy. The same goes for you all. Yeah, they all drawled without any enthusiasm, except Zoro who just smirked at their misery. You too, Zoro. No problem, the young swordsman replied coolly. A true swordsman is not afraid to eat some greenery. Ace smacked him over his head. Stop sounding so cool, he yelled. Zoro glared at him while the others laughed. Don't worry, guys, Sanji suddenly piped in with a bright smile. Soon I'll become the best cook in the world and even vegetables will taste good. Drool started to form at the corner of Luffy's mouth and he wiped it with the back of his hand. Can't wait to eat Sanji's food again. Law's eyes flickered to him. No one else paid much attention to his precise words, but the team caught on the use again, even though Sanji had never prepared a meal for them yet. You still have a long way to go, little eggplant, Zeph commented from the corner where he sat in his wheelchair. Sanji's face fell. Cora patted his head gently, ignoring the visible flinch his action had evoked. You can do it if you'll try hard enough, he encouraged the boy and got a beaming grin for that. Really, of course. Speaking of being healthy and all. Law spoke up, narrowing his eyes at their adoptive father's cigarette. When are you gonna quit smoking, Cora-san? Cora looked like a deer caught in a bright light. He drawled, searching for a good excuse, but came up empty. I'm not a growing boy anymore. Law rolled his eyes and the others just simply burst out laughing. The giant blonde rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. "We should go now," he stated, swiftly changing the topic. "Beppo, you ready?" "Yeah. Let's go then. We should be going too," Luffy said after those two left and then looked at Sabo. "Sabo, you're guarding home today, right?" "Yeah." Sanji glanced up at him, then quickly dropped his gaze down to his lap. "Sorry." "Huh?" Sabo blinked. "Hey, that's fine. This isn't because of you," he said, reaching to ruffle the younger boy's mop, ignoring the even more violent flinch the moment his hand made contact with his hair. During the time Sanji had been with them, they all had noticed that despite him wanting physical interaction, from all people who had touched him, only Luffy and Makino didn't raise such a reaction. Law theorized that it was due to his body's current condition and mental fragility after such a stressful ordeal adding up on top of the past trauma, and that it should go away once he was at full health. So, everyone made an effort to ignore it. They all knew what it meant to have the past coming back to haunt them. Hopeful blue orbs slowly slid up to Sabo's face. "We can play cards," the latter suggested. The younger blonde's smile bloomed in full power again. "Okay. I don't think whoever was watching us left just yet," Luffy stated with a slight furrow in his brow. "It's not the guy that was following us in Fuchsia, and I can't seem to find them," he growled in frustration. "We should all be careful." "I didn't notice anything," Ace murmured, and Law nodded in agreement. "Me neither," Zoro admitted. Luffy's wide grin was instantly up in all its megawatt glaring glory. "That's why I'm the youngest, she. "That makes no sense whatsoever," the others intoned, sweat dropping. 3 hours later, somewhere in the forest of Mount Kalubo. "How the hell are you so strong?" Ace complained loudly as he laid sprawled on the ground on his back, trying to catch his breath. Luffy was sitting on the branch high up in the tree cross-legged with one of his arms propped on his knee and his chin nestled on his palm. The straw hat rested on his back and warm wind ruffled his unruly black hair. His eyes were closed and mouth curled into a serene smile. A perfect picture of content. "Because I have a lot to protect," he replied in a soft voice. Ace glared up at him as he sat there, calmly enjoying the peaceful moment without the decency to be even sweating while Ace himself was fully drenched and already exhausted. Throwing an arm over his eyes, the fire user groaned at the unfairness of it all. Luffy sniggered, opening his eyes to look down at his brother. Dark tendrils of smoke rising from the forest caught his attention and he jumped to his feet in alarm. "Ace," he yelled out. "I see smoke coming from our house. We need to go." "Huh?" the older raven grunted, peeking over his arm. A rubbery appendage suddenly wrapped around his waist and he blanched. "Wait. Luffy-ya." The name of the little menace dragged out into the scream as Ace was yanked from the ground and catapulted after Luffy, who rocketed himself across the forest. The moment Luffy touched the ground of the clearing in front of Dayton's hut, dropping Ace down unceremoniously, a blue sphere expended from somewhere within the forest and Law with Zoro appeared right next to him. With terrified eyes, all four stared at the house engulfed by fire, spewing pillars of smoke into the sky. "Why is no one outside?" Ace whispered in horror. A power wave exploded from Luffy and rolled throughout the area, kicking up dust from the ground and leaving cracks on the tree trunks and the frame of the house. It swept through the fire, pressing it down until it died under its overwhelming force, leaving only stray wisps and smoldering embers. Even though they were excluded from their little pirate king's surge of conquerors' hockey, it was powerful enough to manifest itself in a physical world, and three boys felt their breath involuntarily rush from their lungs and their visions blur for a split second. They managed to gather their bearings quickly though, just in time to see Luffy disappear inside the half-burned house. The air inside was hot and suffocating. Luffy coughed, his heartbeat reaching a frightening speed as he saw bodies scattered randomly on the floor. His observation hockey was useless, and it took him a few moments, excruciating long seconds, to tune into the voice. The relief that washed over him as he heard everyone's voices was heavenly. They were alive, just unconscious. Luffy quickly scanned the room. Dayton was fine, Dogro was fine, Magro was fine. He noted absent-mindedly, his gaze lingering on every single person for a briefest of the moment to confirm that they were alive and then moved on to the next one. Zeph was fine, Sanji was. The others had already started to drag everyone out, when Luffy's eyes fell on Sanji. his breath hitched in his throat. He heard no voice. No familiar sound of waves lapping, no impression of freedom and sea breeze, only a silent void. Luffy scrambled closer. His trembling hands cupped those pale cheeks and it seemed like the world stopped. Panicking, the boy looked around wildly as if searching for something, anything that would help. Sabo's top hat lying abandoned on the floor without his blonde brother anywhere in sight caught his attention. And he instantly knew who exactly was responsible for this. Luffy scooped Sanji, his small, fragile, limp, lifeless nakama, into his arms and burst outside, barely registering Korra's and Beppo's presences, all his focus on only one person. Law? He's not breathing. Sanji's not breathing, please, save him.